It is the Beaver Banter podcast. I'm CJ Baumgartner, my co-host Ian Rivers. We cover all things related Bemidji State athletics. And Ian, it certainly feels a little bit more like spring with how warm it's been getting. But spring sports are just around the corner. Some of these activities have opened up over the weekend or over the week. I know softball is getting ready this weekend, and we have a couple other sports too that have got their seasons going.
Yeah, exactly. It's right now, I don't know how warm it is up there near you, but it's kind of we've got that fake spring weather down here where it just baits you in for about a week and a half. And then I'm sure the cold weather will return at some point, but it's starting to feel like spring. So, of course, spring sports, like you said, getting into action. Softball is a tournament this weekend in St. Cloud. And then I think, yeah, track and field starting up, tennis as well.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, same kind of situation we had in the fall where we're not going to focus too much, unfortunately, on some of these preseason tournaments and invites and stuff like that, just because we do have the winter sports that are still kind of wrapping up. I don't foresee too much of a postseason berth for women's basketball. We'll touch on that briefly today. So some of these will start wrapping up here within the next month for sure. And then we'll, of course, be able to talk about some of those spring sports. But yeah, just keep an eye on it if you're a spring sport fan. Those things are starting up,
Yeah, starting up,
or they already
softball
have.
getting ready, and track and field. The Beavers, they had a meet in Duluth at UMD, and the Beavers won 9 events, and Mary Godwin bettered her own program record in the mile when she won the event with a time of 5 minutes and 10.1 seconds. So a nice afternoon, evening, day, probably since it's a track meet for women's track and field. Always been a program that sneakily, you always hear everybody setting some program record every once in a while. I mean, that's just how that sport is, but a program that stayed pretty consistent over the last few years, at least since we've been up there. And then in women's tennis, Bemidji State was also in Duluth against UMD. They ended up dropping both those games. That happened just a few days ago. For those matchups. So that's your quick update. But like you said, Ian, we still have some winter sports that we do need to talk about because their seasons are ramping up. And let's start with the good news. Let's start with men's basketball because Ian, the Beavers have clinched a spot in the NSIC playoff tournament. That's been the first time in a few years, and especially the first time in a few years that there's been so much confidence. And like, this isn't just like, oh, look, they kind of snuck in, maybe they can win a game and like whatever. This is a team that you definitely think can make a little bit of a run, and they did what we hoped and expected them to do, which is get a weekend sweep.
Yeah, they took care of business pretty confidently. I was watching a little bit of that Minot State game on Friday evening. The scoreline ended up being only 6-point win, but I think it was a little bit more distant than that. Minot kind of closed the gap at the end. UMary, obviously a 19-point dominant victory there. So they took care of business. And a little bit more good news. When I was trying to research the NSIC basketball tournament, years past, it's been the top 4 teams in each division. So that's what we've been talking about because I didn't know. I think it's a new change this year as far as last year goes. The tournament was only the top 4 teams. And so now we have that's good news because now we don't have to get in there as the 4 seed, which looks likely, by the way. We'll touch on that in a second, but now we get to go in as the 4 seed and play the 5 seed from the South instead of going in as the 4 seed and playing the 1 seed from the South. So it's at least a chance to win a tournament game, get a little bit more momentum, and keep your season alive for at least one more day out there in South Dakota. So yeah, I think it's really good. And basically what you're going to use these last 4 games of the year as is kind of a dress rehearsal for that tournament because that's basically what it's going to be. You've got 3 of the top 3 teams in the NSIC North. Obviously, you won't be playing any of them in the first round, but you could end up facing off against any of these teams later on in the tournament. You got 2 top 25 teams coming into town with Northern State and MSU Moorhead, and then next weekend's action St. Cloud State and Minnesota Duluth. So we'll touch on those when we get there, but definitely you can use this weekend for sure to judge where you're going to stack up. You hope that you can come in and compete with these teams and maybe win one of these 2 games at home And that gives you a lot of confidence going into that NSIC tournament, I'd have to imagine. I don't know if anybody's going to be predicting that the Beavers are going to go on this magical Cinderella run and win the tournament, but I absolutely think that we could, surprise the team, win a game, and then upset somebody in the second round. I don't think that that's past this team. If they're playing at their best, I think they can compete with just about any team in this tournament. Moorhead did kind of give us the business when we were up there, or I should say out west for Bemidji terms, but we'll see how we can fare against them at home.
And I think it's really important to mention that they're peaking at the right time. And it's something that we talked about with women's soccer in the fall, and it's something that we talked about with football in the fall as well. Like the team was crescendoing at the right time, and that's exactly what this team is doing. Sutherland, Coney, I mean, you throw all these guys in there, and every single stat, you read the box score, and it's Sutherland had another double-double with a 24-point game or something like that, or Coney chipped in another 25 points or something like that. These guys have been coming through for this team and really helping guide the ship. And I'm trying to find the exact record, but it's not just that they're winning games. They're also finding ways to win on the road, which is something that is incredibly challenging, especially in the NSIC. You got to bust your team all over the middle of the Great Plains and try and stay in a Best Western hotel after eating Domino's the night before and try and play a basketball game all the way through the year. And they've done a really good job of doing that. So here's the stat. Bemidji State improves to 5-6 in road games and won for the 11th time in its last 14 starts. Bemidji State has won 3 straight and 4 of its last 5 games on the road. So that's also something that's important. It's not just that you're playing within the friendly confines of the BSU gymnasium. It's that you can go on the road to Sioux Falls and you can travel with your game. And I think that's something that's going to be very, very important for the Beaver team as the season gets going.
Yeah, I agree. The other thing, I mean, they're an overtime loss and a mistake away from being on a 5-game win streak here heading into um a really tough weekend in the NSIC North. And I haven't really been looking forward. I'm trying to maybe see if I can find anything right now on like how good the Beavers' chances of making the D2 men's basketball tournament are, because we're on the season 16-8. If we say we win for some reason 3 out of these last 4 games, like we win 1 this weekend and then we go and sweep St. Cloud and Duluth, I mean, that's a 19-9 record heading into the tournament. If we win 1 or 2 games there, that's like 20-win season. I would have to imagine that would be a decent, at least, bid to maybe get yourself closer to that tournament.
Right.
And so that's something to look at. And right now, if we're looking at just the NSIC tournament preview, our matchup would be Minnesota State Mankato, currently sitting at 15-9, 9-9 in the conference. And our only running with them so far this season has been a 10-point victory in, I believe, was that at home or was that in Mankato? It was at home in Bemidji, 79-69. That's our only meeting with them this year. So, I mean, you'd have to feel pretty confident going into that game. You feel a lot more confident going into a game with them rather than Sioux Falls or Wayne State, even though you did just take Sioux Falls down to the wire in a game last weekend or 2 weeks ago. So there's a lot to look forward to coming down the stretch here of the season for the BSU men's basketball team. And that is something that we haven't even been really be able to talk about, because like you said, even the last time I think that they made the tournament in Sioux Falls was kind of a, wow, they're there, but what are they really going to do? I think is
And
kind
they
of
beat
what our
Mankato.
expectations
They
were.
upset them. And we are like, oh my gosh, how did
Yeah.
this happen? We expected them to get the brakes beaten off them. And they won. And then they lost the next game. But yeah, I get like exactly.
Yeah, so I don't know. I guess we'll touch on that a little bit more next weekend. I guess if the Beavers do have a good weekend here, I don't know if they start releasing a kind of rankings like they do in soccer and football, sort of thing. But definitely something to look out for as the season moves along. Because I mean, how exciting would that be to have 3 teams from BSU make the NCAA tournaments in one single season. I mean, I'm sure I don't know. It probably hasn't happened before because, hockey has only made it once in the last like 10, 11 years now, and
Hmm.
soccer and football just recently started making it. So I doubt that that's ever happened in a single season. So, and then obviously we can start touching on how hockey is just going to magically turn their season around and win the CCHA tournament, and they'll be in too.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I the hockey team, man, they all I can say is at least that it was a very nice night on Saturday for that little girl, and that they were able to do something nice for her and some other charitable organizations. Bemidji Pioneers got a really good story on on everything, breaking down the Make a Wish night and everything. But look, I think you made the comment on Friday night when the Beavers got shut out. You were like, "Man, they got about the teddy bears. About you got to score a goal to make sure that they throw 'em."
that was maybe a little mean, but yeah, I mean, we offensively, man. I don't know. Are we trying to make the transition, or do we have more to say yet? Because I have plenty to say on the men's hockey team.
Yeah, let's go
Um,
right into hockey. Let's do it.
all right, good for basketball. Obviously, they got a tough weekend ahead of them. Hopefully, they can get one, if not two wins. I have a ton of confidence in them. But yeah, men's ice hockey, man. It's been a brutal January. Just kind of like it was last year. And you'll have to excuse me for just a moment. Um I'll go ahead and pull up their last season schedule because I was kind of looking at that, and it's kind of the same thing that happened last year. Like, we forget that they were under 500 last year, and they really did not have a ton of success because they went on this horrifying losing streak around the end of the season. And I'll read you off because I was looking at it earlier this week. As my apologize to all of our YouTube viewers, my camera's pretty pretty bad, so I'm trying to fix that for you guys. I am.
And for
Oh
those of
my
you
gosh.
listening on the podcast, go to the YouTube page and just see Ian's camera freeze up. So at least
Every
it'll be a little
15
entertaining.
seconds, man. Okay, here's men's hockey as I clicked on the women's hockey. So January comes, right? We have a great weekend against Lake Superior State, win 5-1 both nights at home. And then you even win another game against Receiving Volts Bowling Green, 5-3 in Ohio the next night. Then you go on a 6-game losing streak, uh, spanning across almost an entire month. You win a game against Northern Michigan to end that streak. You go and you get the brakes beaten off of you against the top team in the country, Mankato, 5-1 both nights. You lose. You come home against St. Thomas, who was pretty abysmal last season, and squeak out 2 wins, including a 4-3 overtime win on senior night. And then you lose your opening game in the CCHA playoffs against Bowling Green, and you're like, well, yeah, even though we're the 3 seed, we kind of just backed into the playoffs here, and we're probably going to lose in the first round again, and whatever. We win 2 straight games. Wow, cool. At least we can say we made the semifinals. That was what we were projected to do. Obviously, if you want it to go chalk, the 3 seed should lose in the semifinals. Then we go into Hooten, beat Michigan Tech, number 13 in the country. And we're like one of the most controversial games, maybe in college hockey, like in the past 15 years, away from going back to the NCAA tournament. And so I think recency bias there is obviously a very real thing. Like the tournament run that the Beavers made kind of made their season look a little bit better than it was last year, even though they ended up going 19-20 overall. And then if you tab over and look at our current record right now, we've just fallen under 500 at 11, 12, and 5. So many overtime games this season. And we talked about all the drop points, and it didn't happen this week. It happened last week, like we talked about. But I really am nervous about this because I don't think we're going to get a home playoff series. I really do not. If you look at our schedule to end the season, we go to Ferris State, a team who is playing red hot right now. They're within 1 point now of the Beavers for that 4 seed in the CCHA. Then we come back home to play Mankato, who is currently leading the CCHA. And that just seems like it's destined for us to play 2 good games of hockey, just like we did against Michigan Tech, and lose because we can't score any goals offensively. And then you go to a scrappy and improved St. Thomas team at St. Thomas to end the season. That seems like a really tough stretch. And I'll try to pull up the schedule because Ferris State, I'm pretty sure they have the easiest remaining schedule in the CCHA. They end the season obviously with us this weekend. You go next weekend, they play Northern Michigan, who is only 1 point out of the 7th place position. And then they finish their season with Lake Superior State, who currently is the bottom feeder in the conference. So I'm not very confident, and I'm going to predict that we're not going to get a home series in the CCHA tournament. A wise man once told me, always bet against your favorite teams because you're either happy or you're right. So I'm going to go ahead and do that because either I'm going to be right about this team or they're going to prove me wrong. And I'll be very happy to shut my mouth, if that happens. But we haven't seen it over the last month and a half. It's been very dreadful. Since the new year, what was our record since the new year? It's like 2-7-1, not including the loss. I guess technically the loss to Minnesota was before the new year. It was on New Year's Eve. So 2-7-1 since the new year.
Yikes.
And that's against some teams like Lake Superior State, Northern Michigan, a Duluth team who's very down this year, who you couldn't take advantage of and get one win out of that, where you gave up a goal again in the last 2 minutes of the game, where you would have had a 1-0 victory. And man, it's disappointing. And to play so well, I think Lucas brought it up on Twitter, to play so well in both of those games against Michigan Tech and even that loss to Lake Superior State on Saturday, and to lose all 3 of those hockey games in regulation, man, it's
brutal.
it's gut-wrenching. But I'm hopeful for the future, but I'm also nervous, right? Because this transfer portal thing, man, it scares the life out of me because you just never know what's going to happen season to season. Like we had Lucas Sillinger walk out on this program, and there's been some people, I've had some interactions on Twitter that say, well, Lucas, Serratori and Lucas just butted heads. He didn't play the Serratori system, and I'm like, at what point do we start questioning the Serratori system? Because that system, it doesn't score goals when you let people like Lucas Sillinger walk out the door all the time. And so I'm hoping that that doesn't happen, especially when you look at guys like Leighton Road, man. He's having a fantastic freshman season. And that to me screams like, yeah, maybe he wants to stay here. Maybe he sees all the young offensive firepower that this team could potentially have in the next couple of seasons as they grow as a unit together. Or maybe he says, man, this is maybe my best chance to go transfer to a St. Cloud State or Minnesota Duluth or, anywhere that he could possibly get an offer from that's going to give him it's not going to be necessarily more opportunity because he's got plenty of opportunity here, but it would be where can I go and win more? That would be my thing that I'm nervous about because the transfer portal giveth and the transfer portal taketh away. So I'm nervous about that. Obviously, I'm not going to predict that anybody leaves, but it's almost, if you have a season where somebody from your program doesn't transfer out anymore, it's almost like a miracle. Because even the Beavers have had 1 or 2 people leave over the past couple of seasons. Zach Driscoll left. Lucas Sillinger, Charlie Combs left for Michigan State after his junior season. So it happens. I just hope it's not going to, affect. Hopefully we can turn it around. And, February was a little bit better of a month for us last season. So I'm hoping that holds true. And I'm hoping that that's the way it goes. But I think it's going to be tough. I think we could split with Ferris State this weekend. They're not as quality as Michigan Tech, but it's going to be a pretty tough ask to go on the road into Michigan and get what we need from this series, because I think realistically, you probably need to get 6 points from this, right? Like 5 or 6 minimum to ensure that you have the best chance possible to get that 4 seed, because then you've got to go take points from Mankato. Even if we get 6 points this weekend or 5, we'll be 6 points clear. If we get 5, then we still probably have to get 3 points against Mankato to keep that buffer zone. And then you have to make sure you go into St. Thomas and take care of business on the last week of the season. Well, Ferris State's playing obviously they're 2 Michigan rivals for Ferris State. So those games aren't gimmies, but man, they played pretty well against Bowling Green this weekend. And so that, to me, I'm nervous about it, but it's still, it still could happen. But I'm going to predict that the Beavers will probably end up going to Ferris or to Big Rapids to Ferris State to play in that first round of the CCHA tournament right now.
Well, and Ferris State's definitely feeling it. They're a team that's a little bit on the upswing, a team that's trying to kind of build back that identity. I believe they're doing like a pack the rank kind of event this weekend, or get the rank. I can't remember what the tagline is, but they want to like get it red or something like that, or fill the rank. Or did you see anything on that on Twitter?
I haven't been on Twitter much over the past couple of days, but I'm sure
I'll look it
they're
up.
going to be doing everything they can to fill the stadium. Because for them, I mean, coming off the couple seasons that they've had, they're probably really excited to be able to say, "Hey, look, we've got a really clear cut opportunity to host a playoff series." Um, and I think that's going to be something to monitor. Obviously, this every weekend at this point is going to tell us a lot more about where the Beavers could end up in the CCHA standing.
They're
Almost
calling
everything
it
is still on the table. Go ahead.
Showdown in the Pound. They are just
Right.
giving away
Okay.
like $3 tickets for students. I think it says here, I'm looking at their Twitter page. They had an alum who bought 50 student tickets just to give them away. So they're expecting sellout crowds over the weekend. I'm trying free popcorn. They're literally doing everything to try and get people to come in the building here as I'm just scrolling through the Twitter page, part of a red out throughout the weekend. So it's going to be interesting. It's two teams that feel like they're going in different directions. Ferris State's feeling like they got the momentum and they feel like they got something going here. And if you're Bemidji State, you had that, like you said, an atrocious record in January that really kind of pushes these guys back. And the most frustrating thing isn't just that they're losing games, isn't just that they're losing close hockey games. Because rarely in this stretch have they really just gotten blasted. It's always just been these close, hard fought losses. But it's that, like you mentioned, Lucas on Twitter, Beaver territory. He said he had the stat of the expected goals, which like I do a lot of baseball stats. There's a lot of like this happened, so here's the stat. But like basically adjusted for inflation, like adjusting, like here's what like should have happened if you project it. The Beavers should have swept handily if you look at the expected goals over the weekend. And that's got to be the more frustrating thing because guys maybe don't look at that stat, but they look at the tape and they see everything and they go, there's an opportunity, should have capitalized here. And that's got to be the most frustrating thing out of all of this.
Yeah, I mean, when I watch our offense, man, I feel like there's just so many opportunities where our offense is so boring where it's just like we're gonna throw the puck at the net. It might go right at the goaltender, and they're like hoping the goalie makes a mistake, right? I've seen so many pucks just hit the goalie. Right, his glove doesn't have to move; it just goes into his glove. Right, he's not flailing to make this amazing save. He's not moving; it hits him right in the chest, or we just straight up whiff the net. Like altogether. I made a comment about Mitchell Martin this weekend. Like if I see him skate in on the short side and try to beat the goaltender on the near post and shoot it right into his chest one more time, I'm going to lose it, man. Because he's done that. Like he scored on that, like against Arizona State, I think, in the first series of the weekend, and he's done it with like zero success every time since. And so it's like you're all these quarter chances and all these half chances that you're throwing at the net. When you come up against a guy like Blake Pietola for Michigan Tech, not Northern Michigan, it's not going to work. He's like one of the best goaltenders in the country, let alone the conference, and he's just not going to be fooled by you throwing the puck at him, hoping that he makes a mistake. It's not really going to happen. So that's the frustrating thing to me. And yeah, having played so well at points this season, it's almost like now you never wish this, but I almost partially wish as a fan we wouldn't have beaten St. Cloud State because it's like now I wouldn't be like, yeah, we kind of stink. Like, that's we were projected to finish fourth. We're currently in fourth, but it's like, we held the top spot in the conference for so long this season, and we beat the number 2 team in the country, and for all intensive purposes, played pretty well on Saturday night against them, even with a 4-1 score line.
Got a sweep against
And the expectations,
Mankato.
a sweep against Mankato, a sweep from a tie. You took 5 points in Tech when you went there early this season. It's like all this stuff happens, and then you just have this January, just like last year, where it's just like it's so ugly. So it is disappointing. But there is still hockey to be played. This team can turn it around. I just keep hoping that this weekend's going to be the weekend. Almost everything is still on the table. We could still technically win the CCHA. It would be near impossible, but it could happen. And we can fall all the way to 7th. We did lock up at least the 7th seed if all things were to go chaotically awful and we go 0-6 in these last 6 games. We have clinched that over Lake Superior State. So they can no longer get home ice in the tournament. But There's still plenty to play for because I think realistically, best case scenario, we're looking at the 3 seed in the CCHA tournament. If Bowling Green drops a couple games and we win 4 out of the last 6 or 5 out of the last 6 or something, or we could, potentially fall all the way to that 6 seed, depending on how St. Thomas or Northern Michigan looks over the last couple weeks. So there's still plenty to play for. And this team is they're well coached. They don't get beat bad in a lot of games, especially when they are kind of as talented defensively as they are right now. Sartori does a good job of making sure they don't get boat raced in a lot of games. So, there's plenty to watch. Games this weekend against Ferris State. Obviously, up to this point, I guess every game is going to be the biggest of the season. So
It's going to have to be. And if they don't get a magical run to the conference final like they did last year, there's not going to be, like you said, we forgot about that last season very quickly when they were controversial goal, chance, opportunity, whatever, away from getting into the NCAA tournament. But like you said, it's just going to be an important weekend for the Beavs, and they have a good opportunity against Ferris, so they can take advantage. It's going to be a hostile environment there. Last couple things, and then we'll wrap up on the podcast. Women's basketball had a nice comeback win in the fourth quarter. Things scored just like 20-some, almost 30 points in the fourth quarter. Their Friday night game to beat Minot State, and then they got the win there. And then they go ice cold on
it looks
Saturday
like
night
when you're
in
looking at the
Mary.
game.
The stat is the Beavers made only 11 of 57 shots from the field, including 3 of 19 from the 3-point line, and managed only 23 points in the first 3 quarters. It's rough because they scored almost 70 points the last game, and then it's just the road of where Bemidji State has played this year and where they've just kind of lined up for them to. It's just some nights it's your night, and other nights you go ice cold like that. Split. Whatever, move on. Next weekend, going to be tougher. How about women's hockey, Ian?
Yeah. That scoreline 39-48 looks like if any college basketball fans like watch Virginia versus Wisconsin or something, and they're both like number 2 and 1 at slowing down the pace of play. It's just ugly to watch as a fan sometimes. But women's ice hockey did split with St. Thomas this weekend, so ended up going 1-3 against St. Thomas on the season. Probably a disappointing result over the course of the season, but they did win 4-1 on Saturday to end their big losing streak of like 12 or 13 games or something like that. And now they come into a series against Mankato, who is the only other team they've beaten in the conference this season. And man, I was going to look up how many Division I women's hockey teams there are, because Mankato State right now, or Minnesota State Mankato, is receiving votes with a record of 13, 16, and 1. So I know there's not a ton of them out there, but man, if you're giving out votes to a team like Minnesota State Mankato, who's 3 games under 500, maybe you should only, be ranking 10
WCHA
teams.
is still a tough women's hockey conference.
It is.
Maybe that's their theory. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be, but I mean, at this point, just keep trying to build. If you can go out there and split again this weekend and get another victory over the Mavericks, that's, I guess, a good thing to hold your hat on for the end of the season. And I think there's reason to be, excited. We talked about the transfer portal already, and like I don't want to project that, but there's only 3 seniors on this roster as of right now, so definitely room for this team to grow, and hopefully next season goes a lot better for them in terms of the success that they have in a lot of these games.
This has been the Beaver Banter Podcast. I'm CJ Baumgartner. That was my co-host, Ian Rivers. Join us next week where we break down the latest in Bemidji State athletics. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, as well as the Beaver Banter YouTube page. Go check it out.